dream destinations, exceptional cruises, polar adventures. Welcome to Beyond the Horizon, the podcast that takes you where the journey truly begins, a production of Area Voyages.
So picture this. It's the year 1755.
Right.
And in a single morning, an earthquake, a massive tsunami, and like a raging firestorm just essentially erased the city of Lisbon off the map.
Yeah, it was All Saints' Day, actually.
Oh, wow. So the churches were completely packed.
Exactly. Thousands of candles were lit everywhere. So when the tremors hit, those candles fell, and it ignited a fire that basically burned for days.
Just absolute devastation.
Yeah, I mean, the water from the Tagus River rushed all the way out to the ocean, exposing these old shipwrecks, and then roared back in as this massive wall of water. The central city was completely leveled.
And this is the crazy part, right? One single neighborhood, sort of clinging to this steep, rocky hill, miraculously survives the whole thing.
Yeah.
And today, that exact labyrinth of a neighborhood, Alfama, it holds the secret to understanding the city.
Uh-huh.
The city that, refuses to shout.
Well, and it's funny because the survival of Alfama wasn't like magic or anything. It was purely geology.
Oh, really? Just the rocks.
Yeah, I mean, that neighborhood sits on dense bedrock. The lower city, the part that was totally obliterated, that was built on softer alluvial soil, so essentially liquefied during the tremors.
Wow, so the ground just turned to soup.
Basically, yeah. So when the prime minister at the time, the Marquis of Pombal, rebuilt the lower city, he used this very rigid, logical grid pattern.
Right, very modern.
But Alfama just remained this untouched, totally chaotic medieval maze of winding alleys. And, to truly understand Lisbon today, you have to understand that psychological contrast between the open grid and those ancient hidden streets.
Which perfectly brings us to the mission of our deep dive today. We are taking this really comprehensive look at one of Europe's most captivating capitals.
And we've got an amazing resource for this.
Yeah, we are decoding a massive 2026 expert travel guide from Area Voyages. It's penned by this travel and cruise specialist, Yvonne Junior Blanchette. And what immediately strikes you when you read this guide is how completely different the strategy has to be for Lisbon compared to, like, Rome or Paris.
Oh, totally. Because in a city like Rome, the history is just aggressively monumental. It demands your attention.
Right. The Colosseum is just sitting there in the middle of traffic.
Exactly. You can't ignore it. But Yvonne Junior Blanchette's guide describes Lisbon as Europe's quietest great city.
The magic here is it's hidden, It's behind these azulejo tiles. It's tucked into small courtyards, whispered in dimly lit rooms,
unfolding slowly across 7 steep hills.
Yeah.
I mean, if you think about standard travel research, you're usually just reading a restaurant menu. You see the list of ingredients, the landmarks, the museums, the famous streets, and you just sort of guess what might make a good day.
Right, you're just assembling pieces.
But digging into this ARI Voyages guide, it feels entirely different. It's like getting the executive chef to pull you out of the dining room, walk you right through the chaotic kitchen, and show you exactly how the meal is made, when to eat it, why the ingredients react the way they do.
It's a complete structural breakdown. Exactly. So we want to help you, the listener, bypass those shiny, loud tourist traps and understand the actual mechanics of the Portuguese capital.
And, the guide approaches the city not as a checklist, which is what most people do, but as a series of distinct psychological and logistical environments.
Yeah, that was fascinating to read.
It really is. And the text insists that before you even think about looking at a metro map or planning your museum days, you have to understand the emotional landscape of Lisbon.
Which is anchored entirely in that one surviving neighborhood we talked about, Alfama.
Right. And more specifically, it's anchored in one very particular sound.
Fado. The music of Lisbon.
Yeah.
The guide describes wandering into Alfama at night, walking through those whitewashed alleys where the streets are so narrow you can literally touch the buildings on both sides.
And just hearing this melancholic music drifting out of an open doorway. I mean, no other city in the world has this exact music and this atmosphere combined.
Alfama is the absolute undisputed birthplace of the genre.
And fado is actually recognized by UNESCO as intangible cultural heritage. But to understand what you're hearing, you kind of need to look at the mechanics of the music itself.
Right, it's very stripped down, isn't it?
Extremely raw. You have a singer, known as a fadista. You have a viola baixo, which gives this steady acoustic bass rhythm. And then, crucially, you have the Portuguese guitar.
Which is fascinating because it doesn't look or sound, for that matter, like a standard Spanish acoustic guitar at all.
Not at all.
It has this weird teardrop shape and 12 strings, and the musician plucks them with these specific finger picks. The sound it creates is almost like shimmering. It sounds like water.
Yeah, that cascading, bright sound, It acts as this perfect counterpoint to the heavy emotional weight of the vocals. Because what the fadista is singing about is the psychological core of the entire city.
Saudade.
Exactly. They're expressing saudade.
And we hear that word thrown around so much in travel literature, it always gets labeled as, untranslatable.
Right, which is a bit of a cop-out.
It is, but the guide does a really brilliant job of breaking down the actual mechanism of that emotion. It's not just sadness.
No, it's a profound, beautiful melancholy. It's an active longing for something or someone that is absent.
Like maybe a longing for a lover who went to sea and never came back, which obviously ties deeply into Portugal's whole maritime history.
Or it could just be a longing for a time in your life that has passed, or even a nostalgic yearning for something that never actually existed.
Wow, missing something you never even had.
Yeah, it is a passionate embrace of missing something. And the guide is incredibly strict about how you need to engage with this. It states that experiencing fado in Alfama is the single most distinctively Lisbon experience you could possibly have. Nothing else comes close.
But, and this is a big but, there is a massive catch.
Huge catch.
Let me actually look at the exact wording here. The guide essentially drops a giant red flag for the traveler. It says that if you want to experience fado, you absolutely must avoid the fado houses located right on the main route of Tram 28.
Tram 28 being that famous vintage yellow tram that winds its way up through the hills.
Right. Now, I have to be honest, my initial reaction to reading that was, deep skepticism.
Really? Why?
Well, telling someone not to go to the famous street for the famous music, that sounds suspiciously like travel snobbery to me.
Ah, I see what you mean.
Think about looking for a pub in Dublin or jazz in New Orleans. The guide makes it sound like if there's a guy standing on the sidewalk with a laminated menu aggressively trying to drag you inside, it's completely fake.
Yeah, totally.
But surely the musicians in those main street restaurants are still talented Portuguese artists, right? Why is the guide so militantly opposed to the main tourist route?
It's an excellent question, and it really comes down to acoustics, psychology, and the fundamental mechanics of what saudade requires to actually exist in a room.
Okay, break that down for me.
It is not about the talent of the musicians on the main street. They might be amazing. It is entirely about the environment. Fado requires extreme intimacy and vulnerability.
So it's an environmental failure.
Yes.
Listening to fado in a massive, brightly lit tourist hall is like trying to have a deep, tearful, heart-to-heart conversation with your best friend while standing in the middle of a crowded, screeching subway car.
That is the perfect analogy. The environment actively destroys the vulnerability you need for the connection.
Okay, that makes total sense.
The guide explains that those tourist-heavy houses on the Tram 28 route, they're fundamentally designed for volume and turnover. You have these large dining rooms, people are clinking silverware, having loud conversations.
Tourists holding up their phones with the flash on, trying to capture a 15-second clip for social media before going back to their steak.
Exactly. The silence and the respect that are absolutely required for saudade to materialize in the room. It just cannot happen there.
So what is the tactical alternative?
The text instructs you to completely leave the main tram line. You have to seek out the small, authentic, hidden fado houses buried in the adjacent side streets of Alfama.
And it says you must book well in advance because these rooms are tiny, right?
Oh yeah. Often they hold no more than 20 or 30 people. And in these authentic spaces, the lights are dimmed. The service completely stops when the music starts.
Wait, really? The waiters just stop?
Totally stop. You do not eat, you do not talk, you do not move. The singer stands right in front of you without a microphone.
Wow.
You hear the sharp intake of their breath. You hear the scraping of the finger picks on the strings. The grief and the beauty in the room become a shared communal weight among those 20 people.
That sounds incredible. The guide promises that a well-chosen, intimate evening of fado is the single experience your client, or you, the listener, will remember the longest after returning home.
Without a doubt.
It actually mentions a specific place as an example of the vibe you were looking for, a spot called Tasca do Chico.
Right.
Now, interestingly, Tasca do Chico is actually located in Barro Alto, which is the bustling nightlife district on a completely different hill. But the guide uses it to illustrate this concept of fado vario.
Yeah, amateur fado. where the atmosphere is just deeply intimate, super spontaneous, and paired with excellent petiscos.
And we should definitely define petiscos for everyone, because they are often lazily translated as just Portuguese tapas, but the culinary philosophy is actually quite different.
Very different. Tapas originated in Spain, often as just a free little bite to cover a drink.
Yeah.
Whereas petiscos are specifically crafted small portions of larger traditional Portuguese meals.
So, like, you might have a small plate of okra salad or a rich, slow-cooked pork cheek.
Exactly. So you're crowded into this tiny tavern, eating these incredible small plates, sharing a bottle of local red wine, and experiencing this raw, unamplified vocal performance.
But the guide definitely brings us back to Alfama as the absolute historical heartland. It suggests combining your evening of music with a walking tour of Alfama just before sunset.
That spatial context is vital. By walking those alleys before the sun goes down, you start to understand the Moorish origins of the city. You see the influence of the Islamic occupation of the Iberian Peninsula in the architecture. The enclosed courtyards, the fountains, the blind alleys that were designed to break the wind and provide shade.
So when you finally sit down in the dark to listen to the fado, you understand that the music is echoing off walls that have literally stood through empires, earthquakes, and centuries of history.
Yeah, it just deepens the whole experience.
But you know, Lisbon isn't just a city of nighttime melancholy.
No, not at all.
When the sun comes up, the psychology of the capital completely flips. The guide takes us from the dark, emotional weight of Alfama in the east and moves us miles down the river to the bright, monumental, energetic district of Belém in the west.
Yeah, it's a total shift in energy.
And it brings us to a morning ritual that I honestly think many casual visitors completely misunderstand.
We are talking about the pastel de nata.
The famous Portuguese custard part. And let me describe exactly what this is, because if you've only had like a mass-produced version at a random bakery back home, you do not know this pastry.
No, it's a completely different animal.
The guide describes this blistered, deeply caramelized, almost burnt-looking top, and that sits inside a flaky, impossibly crisp puff pastry shell that literally shatters when you bite into it.
And it reveals this warm, creamy egg custard inside.
Yes, you dust it with cinnamon and powdered sugar. And the guide points us to the absolute epicenter of this pastry, Pastéis de Belém, a bakery that has been operating since 1837.
Which brings us to a crucial philosophical distinction the text makes. And this is vital if you're trying to travel like an expert. The guide is incredibly explicit. Eating a pastel de nata at this specific bakery is not a tourist activity.
Wait, say that again?
It is not a tourist activity. It is a vital, non-negotiable local ritual.
Okay, and again, I have to throw a flag here, because the moment I read, go to the most famous bakery from 1837, my tourist trap alarm bells were ringing at maximum volume.
Sure, that makes sense.
I mean, telling someone to go to a massively famous historical bakery sounds exactly like telling a visitor to go to Times Square for an authentic New York slice of pizza, or going to Fisherman's Wharf in San Francisco for clam chowder.
Right, the locals usually avoid those places like the plague.
Exactly. How is this not just a manufactured souvenir experience?
It's a very natural reaction to have.
Yeah.
But the mechanics of Lisbon's culture just operate differently. The guide unpacks why Pastéis de Belém defies that Times Square comparison.
Okay, I'm listening.
Times Square is a manufactured space, right?
Yeah.
It has no daily utility for a local New Yorker.
Uh-huh.
But this bakery serves a highly functional daily purpose for the people of Lisbon. Local life and visitor curiosity actually intersect perfectly right here.
Ah, okay.
But the trick, and this is what the ARIA expert guide reveals, is how you engage with it.
Ah, the methodology. Because the guide doesn't just say, go buy a tart.
No, it gives you incredibly rigid instructions.
It says, you must go to Belém in the morning. Not the afternoon for some leisurely dessert, but the morning. You do not wait in the massive line to sit down at a table for full service.
Right, you skip that entirely.
You walk inside, you stand at the counter, you order the tart, you eat it while it is still hot from the oven, and you pair it with a bica.
And the bica is essential to the chemical and cultural balance of this whole ritual.
What exactly is a bica?
It's the Portuguese espresso. The beans often include a higher percentage of Robusta compared to the Arabica blends you find in Italy, and they are roasted slowly.
So what does that do to the flavor?
The result is a coffee that is thicker, darker, and carries a slight, very intentional bitterness.
Oh, and that bitterness is the perfect counterbalance to the rich, sweet egg yolk custard and the sharp cinnamon.
Exactly. So you are standing shoulder to shoulder with locals in suits who are heading to work. You're taking a sharp shot of dark espresso, eating this shattering warm pastry, and you are immediately participating in the actual living rhythm of the city. This is how Lisbon starts its morning.
It's your best argument for heading to Belém early. And the guide also dives into the history to explain why the original recipe here is genuinely extraordinary and impossible to perfectly replicate, even by other excellent bakeries in town.
Oh, the history of it is wild. The pastel de nata was actually invented by Catholic monks at the Geronimo's Monastery, which is located literally right next door to the bakery.
Right. The text explains that back in the 18th and 19th centuries, monasteries and convents used massive quantities of egg whites to starch their religious habits and clothing.
Yeah, the nuns and monks needed the starch, so they had thousands and thousands of leftover egg yolks.
I never even thought about that. What do you do with 10,000 egg yolks?
Exactly. To avoid waste, the monks turned to baking. They created a vast array of what are now known as Portuguese conventual sweets.
Okay, so how did it end up at a public bakery?
Well, following the Liberal Revolution of 1820, religious orders in Portugal were dissolved, and the monks lost all their funding. So, out of sheer desperation to survive, they started selling these specific custard tarts to a nearby sugar refinery.
Wow, just to make ends meet.
Yeah. And then, in 1837, the baking was moved to the current Pastéis de Belém facility. The original recipe from those monks is kept in a secret room. It's known as the Oficina do Segredo, and only a handful of master bakers actually know it.
So you aren't just eating a famous snack, you are consuming the direct result of a 19th century political revolution and the resourcefulness of desperate monks.
Exactly.
And the setting of Belém just amplifies that entire morning. You step out of the bakery, wiping powdered sugar off your chin, and you are standing in the very place where the age of discovery began.
Because Belém is positioned right where the Tagus River widens out to meet the Atlantic Ocean.
Right.
This is the exact spot where Vasco da Gama set sail for India in 1497. The guide points out that Geronimo's Monastery, we just mentioned, and notes that it is a UNESCO World Heritage Site, and really the absolute pinnacle of Manueline architecture.
The guide highlights Manueline architecture here, and what's so fascinating about this style is that it's literally the economics of the Age of Discovery carved into stone.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it.
Like, you look at the limestone pillars and the cloisters, and they aren't just decorated with traditional religious figures. They are sculpted to look like massive twisted ship ropes, armillary spheres, coral, and sea monsters.
And the funding mechanism for that architecture is incredible to consider. King Manuel I funded the construction of the monastery using a massive tax levied on the pepper, spices, and gold that Vasco da Gama and the other explorers brought back from their voyages.
So the nautical mathematics, the use of astrolabes, the mapping of the Atlantic wind currents, all of the abstract science that allowed them to navigate the globe was suddenly translated into a physical limestone monument.
Exactly. Vasco da Gama's tomb is actually right inside the church.
And then you have the Torre de Belém sitting right in the water, looking like a heavily armored chess piece guarding the river mouth. And the monument to the discoveries, this massive concrete prow of a ship.
The light bouncing off the wide estuary there is incredible in the morning.
It really is. By forcing you to experience Belém as this fast-paced morning counter ritual rather than like a sleepy afternoon museum slog, the guide completely shifts your behavior. You stop being a passive observer and start matching the energy of a city waking up.
But once you are fueled by that custard and espresso, the guide makes a hard pivot.
Oh, a very hard pivot.
We move from the poetic beauty of morning light and architecture into an environment that requires intense, almost military-grade tactical planning.
Yeah, we are talking about venturing outside the city limits to the forested mountains of Sintra.
Sintra is, wow. It's an obligatory excursion, yes, but it requires precise logistics.
The guide frames Sintra as the absolute must-do day trip from Lisbon. It's about 30 minutes west, and it's essentially this lush microclimate mountain range where the Portuguese royalty decided to build a series of increasingly bizarre and beautiful summer palaces.
And that microclimate is the key to why Sintra even exists. The granite mountains trap the moisture rolling in off the Atlantic. This creates a dense, cool, fog-shrouded forest environment that is significantly cooler than the baking heat of Lisbon in the summer.
Ah, so the royalty just flocked there to escape the heat.
Exactly, and they built these architectural fantasies.
The guide highlights two main targets. First is the Pina Palace, and if you just Google Portugal, you will see this building. It looks like a bright yellow, red, and purple sandcastle sitting on the absolute highest peak of the mountain.
Yeah, it was built in the 19th century under King Ferdinand II. It is the ultimate expression of European romanticism.
Right, and Romanticism in architecture was this deliberate rejection of the cold, rational logic of the Industrial Revolution, wasn't it?
Exactly. It embraced emotion, myth, fantasy. Pina Palace intentionally mixes Neo-Gothic, Neo-Islamic, and Neo-Renaissance styles. It's designed to look like a mythical castle that just grew organically out of the rock.
And then the second must-see location is Quinta da Regalera. While Pina Palace is this brightly colored fantasy in the clouds, Quinta da Regalera is a dark, mystical labyrinth buried in the woods.
Oh, it's wild. The guide notes it's famous for its dense Masonic, Templar, and Rosicrucian symbolism.
The centerpiece is the initiation. Well, right.
Yes, but it's not a well designed to hold water. It is a massive, subterranean inverted tower. You walk down this spiraling stone staircase that winds deep into the earth.
Creepy, but cool.
Very. It passes through 9 distinct levels, which are widely believed to represent the 9 circles of hell, purgatory, and paradise from Dante's Divine Comedy. At the very bottom, you reach a mosaic of a Templar cross.
So the whole space is designed to simulate a psychological journey of rebirth. You descend into darkness, navigate through these wet underground tunnels, and finally emerge back into the light of the gardens.
It sounds like an Indiana Jones set come to life.
It really does. But here's where the ARIA guide drops an incredibly urgent warning. It stresses that while Sintra is visually spectacular, visiting it without a rigid plan will literally ruin your vacation.
Yes, it's a logistical minefield.
Both Pina Palace and Quinta da Regalera sell timed entry tickets, and the guide emphasizes that in high season, they completely sell out. You cannot just show up.
The text dictates that you must book tickets a minimum of 48 to 72 hours in advance, and even earlier if you're traveling in the summer months.
I cannot emphasize enough how important this is for you, the listener. Imagine showing up to Disney World without a ticket, without having looked at a map, and without understanding the transportation system.
It would be a disaster.
You don't actually see the park. You just spend your entire day sweating, driving in circles looking for parking, and standing in the absolute wrong lines. You miss the magic entirely because you are at war with the mechanics of the place.
And the physical mechanics of Sintra are uniquely hostile to modern tourism. Think about the topography. These palaces were built in the 19th century on the peaks of steep forested mountains.
Right.
They are connected by these narrow, winding, single-lane carriage roads. Those roads were designed for a handful of aristocratic horse-drawn carriages.
And today?
Today, you have thousands of tourists trying to drive rental cars up those same roads alongside massive modern tour buses and local tuk-tuks. The result is absolute physical gridlock.
The guide explicitly describes the local transport situation as chaotic if you arrive without preparation. The train from Rossio Station in Lisbon to Sintra is easy enough, but once you step off that train at the bottom of the mountain, looking up at Pina Palace miles away, you are trapped.
And this is exactly where the value of an expert guide shines. This is the detail that separates ARIF from a generic Google search.
Because Google just says, take the train.
Right. But the ARI guide strongly recommends booking an organized guided tour directly from Lisbon.
Now, generally, I bristle at the idea of an organized tour. They can feel restrictive, like you're being herded around like cattle.
Sure, a lot of people feel that way.
But the guide makes a brilliant case here. Investing in a guided tour for Sintra isn't about being lazy. It is a tactical maneuver. It's about outsourcing the logistical nightmare.
Because knowledge is only valuable when applied correctly. Knowing the history of Romantic architecture is useless if you are stuck in a chaotic, diesel-choked bus queue at the bottom of a mountain in 90-degree heat.
Exactly.
By applying the strategy of a pre-booked guided tour, you let a professional local driver navigate the terrifying switchback roads. You let the guide handle the precise timing of the entry tickets.
You outsource the stress of crowd management.
Yes, allowing your brain to actually focus on the Masonic symbols and the colorful towers. You preserve the emotional energy required to appreciate the fairy tale.
So we have the emotional nighttime mechanics of fado. We have the morning pastry rituals in Belim. We have the tactical logistics of conquering Sintra. But the guide drops a massive strategic pivot right here.
Ah, yes. The when.
It turns out, according to Yvonne Junior Blanchette, most people are visiting Lisbon at the exact wrong time of year.
Yeah, we are shifting from the what and the how directly to the critical importance of when. Let's look at how the guide breaks down the seasons.
Okay.
It acknowledges that spring, from March to May, is beautiful. The jacaranda trees bloom with purple flowers all over the city. Autumn, from September to November is excellent for walking, offering cooler air and golden light.
It even notes that summer June through August is technically manageable. The temperatures usually sit around 30 to 32 degrees Celsius, which is about 86 to 90 degrees Fahrenheit.
But it explains the meteorology of why it's bearable. Because Lisbon is situated directly on the Atlantic coast, the ocean acts as a massive thermal regulator. You get these strong, cooling breezes called the nortada,
which makes it significantly more comfortable than sweltering, stagnant Mediterranean cities like Rome or Madrid in the dead of July.
However, despite the manageable summer, the true revelation in the text is its assessment of winter.
Yes. The guide calls the window from November to March one of Europe's best-kept secrets.
And it really is.
I have to admit, my internal bias flared up again here. When I hear winter in Europe, my brain instantly conjures images of freezing rain, slate-gray skies, biting winds, and half the city being closed down for the season. Is Lisbon really immune to a European winter?
It is entirely different, and again, it comes down to geography and ocean currents. Lisbon is positioned on the extreme southwestern edge of Europe. It benefits from the warming effects of the Gulf Stream.
Okay, so what does that actually mean for the weather?
The text explains that the microclimate is incredibly mild. During the day in January, the temperature rarely drops below 10 degrees Celsius, which is about 50 degrees Fahrenheit.
50 degrees in the dead of winter. You are wearing a light sweater and a denim jacket, not a massive down parka.
Precisely. And the strategic advantages of choosing this mild winter window are immense. The guide details how the texture of the city completely transforms.
The crowds just vanish.
Completely vanish. The cruise ship passengers, the summer backpackers, gone. You can walk into the Geronimo's monastery or stand at the counter at Pastéis de Belém without fighting for elbow room. The museums become these quiet, contemplative spaces.
And the economics of the trip change drastically as well. The guide points to the luxury hotel market. It specifically mentions two spectacular properties.
Right. The Barro Alto Hotel and Memo Alfama.
Yeah, the Barro Alto Hotel, which it calls one of the finest in Portugal. It sits right on the bustling square connecting the nightlife of Barro Alto with the sophisticated shopping district of Chiado.
And then Memo Alfama is this boutique hotel built quite literally into the medieval hillside below the castle. It offers these panoramic rooftop views over the terracotta roofs and the Tagus River.
In the peak summer season, those premium properties command exorbitant top-tier pricing. But the guide notes that in the winter off-season, these incredibly atmospheric, luxury accommodations become highly affordable.
You can basically upgrade your entire lifestyle for the week simply by shifting your dates.
But the detail that really struck me was the aesthetic argument the guide makes for winter. It talks extensively about the physics of the winter light.
Oh, this is fascinating.
Because the sun sits much lower in the sky during the winter months, the angle of the sunlight hitting the city changes. Instead of harsh, direct overhead light bleaching out the colors, you get this low, raking, luminous glow that lasts almost the entire day.
And that low light interacts beautifully with the physical materials of the city. Lisbon is built largely from light-colored limestone and covered in azulejos, those glazed ceramic tiles on the facades of the buildings.
So when that low winter Atlantic light hits the glazed tiles and the white limestone, the entire city acts like an enormous reflector.
It creates a soft, golden aesthetic that photographers and artists have literally obsessed over for centuries.
So if you are listening to this and you have flexible travel dates, and you despise fighting through crowds, and you love the idea of staying in a 5-star boutique hotel without destroying your budget, booking Lisbon in January or February is the ultimate travel hack.
The text does maintain its credibility by noting the reality of winter rain, though. Rain is concentrated heavily in January and February.
But it immediately clarifies the nature of that rain, right?
Exactly. Due to the fast-moving Atlantic weather systems, the rain rarely settles in for weeks of gray drizzle, like it does in, say, London or Paris.
A heavy rainstorm will blow through in the morning, and by the afternoon, the sky is a brilliant, clear blue, and the wet limestone cobblestones are reflecting the light like a mirror.
For an in-depth traveler looking for a residential, intimate version of the city, winter is absolutely unmatched.
Let's say you take that advice. You book flexible winter dates, and because the hotels are cheaper, you decide to stay for a week or two. This brings us to a massive structural recommendation from the guide.
This is a huge point.
Yvonne Junior Blanchette emphasizes that Lisbon should not just be viewed as a quick 3-day city break. It is actually designed to be the perfect anchor for a much grander adventure.
The guide frames Lisbon as the operational hub for a modern Portuguese grand tour, And the reason this hub-and-spoke model works so flawlessly is because of Portugal's remarkably compact geography.
This is a crucial point, especially for travelers coming from massive land masses like the US, Canada, or Australia. We often wildly misjudge European distances.
All the time.
People will plan an itinerary that tries to cram Paris, Rome, Munich, and Barcelona into 10 days.
And they end up spending 50% of their expensive vacation sitting in airports, dealing with security lines, or staring out the window of a 10-hour bus ride. The exhaustion just ruins the experience.
It is the most common mistake in European travel planning. But Portugal's scale actively prevents this. The guide details the rail infrastructure, specifically highlighting the Alpha pendular train.
This is the high-speed tilting train system that runs the length of the country.
The tilting mechanism is amazing. Because Portugal has older winding tracks built through hilly terrain, a standard high-speed train couldn't operate safely at top speeds. But the Alpha pendular carriages literally tilt into the curves, allowing them to maintain high speeds without throwing the passengers out of their seats.
And because of that engineering, the guide notes that the city of Porto is just a smooth 3-hour journey north of Lisbon.
3 hours. You can literally stand at the counter eating a pastel de nata in Belém for breakfast, get on the train, and be sitting at a cafe along the Douro River in Porto in time for lunch.
Exactly. And the guide emphasizes Porto because it provides a complete cultural and architectural counterpoint to Lisbon.
How so?
Well, where Lisbon is southern, bright, built of white limestone, and historically focused on maritime exploration, Porto is northern, built from dark, heavy granite, and historically focused on commerce and the wine trade.
And if you look the other direction, the stunning, dramatic cliffside beaches of the Algarve coast are just 3 hours to the south.
Yeah.
You have the Alentejo wine country right next door to the east, famous for its cork oak forests and slow-paced agricultural life. Lisbon is a base camp, set up perfectly at the center of a wheel. Every single spoke takes you to a completely different geographic and cultural world, all within a half-day's travel.
The Arahaya guide actually presents a specific call to action based on this reality. For travelers looking to book 10 days or more, it explicitly suggests combining a stay in Lisbon and Porto with a river cruise through the Douro Valley.
The Douro Valley is astounding. It's one of the oldest demarcated wine regions on Earth. The river cuts through these massive, steep mountains that have been hand-terraced over centuries to grow grapes for port wine.
By utilizing this structural approach, you completely eliminate vacation burnout. You aren't packing and unpacking your suitcase in a panic every single morning.
Right, you just anchor yourself in Lisbon. You absorb the intense multicultural energy of the Moraria neighborhood.
Moraria is a great example. The guide notes it as the historic Moorish quarter. Today, it's this incredible melting pot where traditional Portuguese culture blends with Indian, Mozambican, and Goan influences.
The smells of curry and traditional grilling meats mix in the streets. You can spend days diving into the urban energy of Moraria and the nightlife of Bairro Alto.
But the moment you feel overwhelmed by the urban density, you can seamlessly escape. The text mentions the Setúbal Peninsula, just an hour south across the massive 25 de Abril suspension bridge.
The guide calls it one of the most beautiful and least visited natural areas in Portugal.
You have the Urabita Natural Park, where steep green limestone mountains crash directly into crystal clear, calm ocean waters with white sand beaches.
Or you head an hour north to Óbidos, which the guide describes as a perfectly preserved medieval walled town. It is famous for ginja, a sour cherry liqueur that they serve to you in a tiny edible chocolate cup. You can literally walk the perimeter of the medieval castle walls in the morning and be back in downtown Lisbon eating a massive plate of fresh seafood by dinner. It's brilliant trip design.
But, to execute this grand master plan successfully, the guide insists on one final layer of knowledge. You cannot conquer the city or use it as an effective hub if you do not understand its physical, practical texture on a daily street-level basis.
Right. We have to talk about the physical realities of moving your body through Lisbon. We've established that the city is built on 7 steep hills, but it's not just the incline, it is what the hills are paved with.
Ah, yes. The Calçada Portuguesa.
The iconic Portuguese cobblestones. Visually, the calçada is stunning. The pavements are hand-laid mosaics using small cubes of black basalt and white limestone, forming intricate patterns of waves, stars, and ships all over the city.
But the practical warning from the source is severe. Limestone is a relatively soft rock. After decades of millions of shoes walking over it, the stones become polished smooth.
Yeah, they are uneven, and the moment it rains, or even if there is heavy morning dew, they become notoriously, dangerously slippery.
If you are listening to this and mapping out your own trip, you might look at Google Maps and think, oh, I can easily walk from Bishop to Chiado in 10 minutes.
What the flat 2D map does not show you is the 45-degree incline on slick, wet limestone. You have to pack shoes with serious, actual rubber grip. If you bring sleek, hard-soled leather dress shoes, you're going to literally slide all the way down from the Castelo de San Jorge straight into the river.
It's a vital safety detail. And because of this extreme topography, the text explains that the city's vintage transport network is not merely a quaint novelty maintained for tourists. It is essential functional infrastructure.
The trams and the public elevators, the elevadors, bridge the impossible gaps in the terrain.
The elevators are incredible. The guide highlights the San Justa lift. It is an enormous freestanding neo-Gothic iron elevator built in 1902.
It looks like a piece of the Eiffel Tower was dropped into the middle of a city street.
And there's a reason for that aesthetic. It was designed by Raoul Misnier du Ponsard, who was an admirer and student of Gustave Eiffel's techniques. It literally acts as a vertical bridge, connecting the lower grid-plan Baixa district straight up into the sophisticated, elevated Chiado neighborhood.
Yeah.
You take a century-old iron elevator with polished wood cabins just to commute from one street to another.
Which brings us back full circle to Tram 28. We talked about how the main road is crowded and you should avoid the fado houses directly on its path. The guide also issues a standard safety warning that pickpockets naturally operate on this crowded, distracted route.
Yeah, it points out that the tram is loud, incredibly crowded, and very slow.
But here is the most brilliant poetic observation in the entire guide. It says the slowness is precisely the point.
That is a profound insight into the psychology of the city. You do not board Tram 28 because you are in a rush to get to a meeting. You board it to slowly, deliberately glide through history.
The vintage 1930s wooden carriages grind and screech as they climb the impossible grades through the neighborhoods of Alfama, Grassa, and Estrela.
They navigate corners so tight the tram almost scrapes the buildings. It offers a physical transit through the oldest, untouched parts of the city that no modern bus or subway could ever replicate.
You take the tram specifically to step off at the Miraduros.
The viewpoint terraces.
Yes. Because the city is built on hills, it is naturally tiered. The guide specifically directs you to the Miradoro de Santa Luzia and the Miradoro de Grassa.
These are large, open public terraces, often shaded by pine trees or bougainvillea, designed for exactly one purpose.
Right.
To just stop, lean against a tile wall, and look out over the terracotta rooftops cascading down to the shimmering Tagus River.
To enjoy Lisbon, you absolutely have to adopt its pace. If you try to force the city to move at a frantic, hyper-efficient modern speed, you will be miserable.
And that deliberate, unhurried pace extends directly to the culinary texture of the city. We explored the pastel de nata and the petiscos, but the guide makes sure to highlight that Portuguese cuisine is fiercely reliant on exceptional, straightforward ingredients rather than complex, heavy sauces.
It is built on the finest olive oils, garlic, wine, and specifically the Atlantic seafood caught that very morning.
The seafood recommendations are staggering. The guide talks at length about bacalhau, which is dried and salted cod.
Now, think about the history there. Portugal has hundreds of miles of pristine coastline teeming with fresh fish, yet their national dish is a fish caught in the freezing distant waters of the North Atlantic.
It is a legacy of the Age of Discovery and the Portuguese fishing fleets that sailed to the Grand Banks of Newfoundland. Salting and drying the cod was the only way to preserve protein for the months-long voyages.
And today, the text notes there are supposedly 365 different ways to prepare bacalhau one for every day of the year.
It also mentions percebes, which are goose barnacles.
They look like little dinosaur toes.
They do. And they grow on the jagged rocks in the freezing Atlantic surf. Fishermen literally risk their lives to scrape them off the rocks between crashing waves. You eat them cold, squeezing the briny meat out of the tube, paired with a freezing cold green wine, Vinho Verde.
To experience this, the guide directs readers to institutions like Cervejaria Romero. It calls Romero the definitive Lisbon seafood experience.
It is not a quiet, romantic restaurant. It is a bright, noisy, tiled hall operating near the Intendente Square for over 60 years. Waiters rush around slamming down enormous plates of tiger prawns, garlic clams, and whole lobsters.
Or if you want a modern aggregation of the culinary scene, the guide suggests browsing the Time Out Market, located inside the historic Mercado da Ribeira.
They took this massive 19th century produce market and turn half of it into a curated food hall featuring stalls run by the city's top Michelin-starred chefs. The textures of the food are as deep and layered as the limestone hills.
And finally, the text offers a small but highly effective practical detail regarding language. It notes that English is extremely well understood in Lisbon, especially in the tourist areas, hotels, and among the younger generations.
But the guide insists that you should not just default to English immediately.
It explains that taking the time to learn and use a simple bom dia for good morning, or obrigado if you are male, and obrigada if you are female for thank you, goes a tremendously long way.
It alters the dynamic of the interaction. It shifts you from being a demanding, passive consumer of a destination to being an active, respectful participant in the culture. The Portuguese people are generally described as incredibly warm, polite, and proud, and that small linguistic effort breaks down the barrier instantly.
So let's retrace the map we've drawn today. We have spent this entire deep dive completely decoding Yvon Junior Blanchet's master itinerary from the Area Voyages guide. We learned that the true secret to unlocking Lisbon isn't shouting for attention, it's learning how to listen.
We learn the importance of environment. We seek out the deep acoustic intimacy of genuine fado by avoiding the high-volume tram routes and finding the small, hidden, dimly lit houses in the medieval alleys of Alfama.
We embrace the psychology of the morning by standing shoulder to shoulder with locals at the counter in Belém, eating a hot pastel de nata crafted from a secret 1837 recipe, while surrounded by the Manueline architecture funded by the Age of Discovery.
We acknowledge the strict physical realities of the 19th century mountain roads in Sintra, understanding that outsourcing the logistics by booking a guided tour and timed entries 48 to 72 hours in advance is the only way to protect the magic of the Pina Palace from the chaos of modern gridlock.
We uncovered the massive strategic advantage of hacking the calendar visiting in the winter to take advantage of the Gulf Stream microclimate, the affordable luxury hotels, the empty museums, and the physics of that golden Atlantic light hitting the limestone.
And we completely reframed the structure of the trip, viewing Lisbon not as a 3-day rush, but as the central hub for a comprehensive Portuguese grand tour. We can utilize the high-speed tilting trains to seamlessly connect the deep granite history of Porto, the terraced vineyards of the Douro Valley, and the dramatic cliffs of the Algarve.
So if you are listening to this right now, whether you are actively sitting at your kitchen table prepping for a flight to Portugal, or you just love understanding the hidden gears and mechanics of what makes a great city tick, you can apply this framework to any travel.
Look for the local rituals hiding in plain sight.
Respect the physical logistics and limitations of massive historical sites, and never be afraid to travel deep in the off-season to see a place completely transform.
It all circles back to the very first point the guide made. Lisbon unfolds slowly. It actively rewards the traveler who is willing to slow their heart rate, to carefully walk the slippery, polished calçada portuguesa up the steep hills, and to listen to the quiet greatness echoing off the tiles. But analyzing the city, this deeply leaves us with one final, deeply complex thought to consider.
Oh, I like where this is going. What is the final puzzle piece?
Think back to the very beginning, when we broke down the mechanics of saudade. That uniquely Portuguese, untranslatable feeling of beautiful melancholy, a profound, active longing for something you love that is absent, or a time in history that is gone forever.
Right. The emotional engine of the fado music we heard in Alfama.
Here's the question to ponder. If saudade is fundamentally a longing for a past that is lost, does visiting a city that so miraculously preserves its deep past actually cure that longing?
Think about it. You are riding 1902 iron elevators. You are eating recipes saved by desperate monks in 1837. You are walking through a medieval Moorish labyrinth that survived a 1755 apocalypse. Does immersing yourself in that perfectly preserved history satisfy the yearning for the past?
Or, by experiencing the undeniable intimate magic of Alfama at night, or staring out at the low winter light reflecting off the Tagus River from a quiet Miradouro, does Lisbon actually ensure the exact opposite? Does the city guarantee that the moment you get on the plane to fly home, you will carry a permanent aching sense of saudade with you forever, longing for the city itself?
Now that is something to chew on while you wait for your next hot pastel de nata.
You've been listening to Beyond the Horizon, the podcast by Area Voyages. The full article for this episode is available at www.areavoyages.com. Remember to like, share the podcast, and leave a review to help promote our work. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss anything. Until next time, safe travels.